The whispers in the walls. Sarah and her fiancé, James, had just purchased their first home together, a charming, old house that stood on the edge of a quiet, small town. It wasn't exactly modern, but it was filled with character. The hardwood floors creaked as they walked, and the tall windows gave the rooms an air of grandeur, despite the dust and age. The house had been on the market for years, and although a few locals had whispered about the place being haunted, neither Sarah nor James paid much attention to such rumors. They were just excited about their new beginning. Their first few weeks in the house were blissful. They spent their days unpacking, cleaning, and decorating. The house felt warm, cozy, even a bit magical in its own way. But that magic soon started to change. It started small. At night, as Sarah lay in bed, she began to hear soft whispers coming from the walls. At first, she thought it was the house settling, maybe the wind creaking through the cracks in the foundation. But the whispers persisted. They weren't loud or clear, but they were constant, like a soft murmur, just out of reach, as if someone was speaking right behind the walls. Sarah dismissed it. She told herself she was imagining things, that maybe she was just tired from all the moving and adjusting to the new space. But one night, after James had fallen asleep beside her, she heard the whispers again. Only this time, they sounded more like words. Fragments of sentences that almost made sense. "It's too late. We never left. We'll take her too." She sat up in bed, her heart racing. She reached over and shook James awake. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James groggily turned to her. "Hear what?" he asked, sounding more annoyed than concerned. "The voices. I swear I heard them." James blinked at her, still half asleep. "Sarah, it's just the house. You're probably hearing things." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She tried to ignore it, but each night, the whispers grew louder. She began to dread bedtime, lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the strange murmurs coming from the walls. The words seemed to shift, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, always chilling. It was as though something, or someone, was trying to reach her. One evening, while James was away on a business trip, Sarah decided to investigate. She had to know what was happening. She spent hours searching the house, pressing her ear to the walls, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. But no matter where she went, the whispers followed her. That's when she noticed something odd. In the corner of the living room, beneath the wallpaper, there was a small, faint crack in the wall. It was so tiny she'd never noticed it before. Curious, Sarah pulled the wallpaper back, just a bit. The crack stretched across the entire wall, running all the way from the floor to the ceiling. She gasped. Her hands trembling, she ran her fingers over the crack, noticing that it wasn't just a fissure, it was a seam, like a door had once been there and was sealed shut. A door that had been forgotten over time. She stood back and stared at the crack, the whispers growing louder in her ears, now unmistakable. "Open it, open it." The voices echoed, sending a cold shiver down her spine. With a trembling hand, Sarah reached for a small, old-fashioned hammer she found in the garage and gently tapped at the seam. To her surprise, the wall gave way easily, as though it had been waiting to be freed. Slowly, the plaster cracked and crumbled, revealing a dark, narrow passage behind the wall. The air inside was thick and musty. As she peered into the darkness, she saw something gleaming faintly in the dim light, a rusted iron door with an ancient lock. Her heart pounded in her chest. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread, but at the same time, a pull, a desire to know what was behind it. The whispers were almost deafening now. "Open it, let us out." Against her better judgment, Sarah retrieved a small key from the drawer in the hallway, one she had found when they moved in. It had no label, no indication of what it might open, but somehow, she knew it would fit. She slid the key into the lock with a creak and turned. The door swung open, revealing a hidden room that seemed to have been untouched for decades. Dust coated the floor, and strange symbols were etched into the walls. But what struck her the most was the large, old-fashioned mirror that stood at the center of the room. It was massive, framed in dark, intricately carved wood, with a reflective surface that was strangely clear, despite the dust and neglect of the room. As she stepped closer, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her reflection looked wrong. It wasn't her own face staring back at her. The woman in the mirror had dark, hollow eyes, her expression twisted into a grim smile. Her lips parted, and Sarah heard a voice, clearer now, whisper from the mirror. "You shouldn't have opened the door, now, you're ours." A cold, icy feeling washed over Sarah. She tried to step back, but her body wouldn't move. The reflection in the mirror seemed to reach out towards her, and with a jolt of panic, she stumbled backward into the passageway. The door slammed shut behind her, and she was trapped in the dark, listening to the whispers now coming from all directions. The last thing Sarah remembered before she lost consciousness was the feeling of cold fingers brushing against her skin, and the sound of the whispers, now louder than ever. The next morning, when James returned home, he found the house eerily silent. Sarah was gone, and no matter how hard he searched, he could not find her. The only thing left behind was a single, old key on the floor, the one that had unlocked the door to the room in the walls. It wasn't long before the house was back on the market. No one lived there for long. And if you listened closely, on a still night, you could hear whispers coming from behind the walls, calling out for the next person to open the door. I hope this story gave you the chills. What do you think? Should Sarah have opened that door?